My name is Brianna Mercer, and for 32 years I lived inside a family that quietly believed daughters were worth less than sons. 3 weeks ago, after both of my parents passed away, my older brother looked me directly in the eyes and said something that finally confirmed what I had always suspected. "Dad made his decision years ago," Marcus said calmly. "The son inherits everything. The daughter gets nothing." Then he changed the locks on the house where I had grown up. The house where I had spent the last 2 years caring for our mother, while cancer slowly tried to take her life. The house where I drove her to chemotherapy, sat beside her hospital bed, and held her hand on nights when the pain made it impossible for her to sleep. Marcus had visited 3 times during those 2 years. 3 visits. Each one lasted less than an hour. But that didn't stop him from tossing my belongings onto the front lawn and telling me I was no longer welcome. "You're a burden," he said, standing in the doorway like he owned the world. And according to him, that was exactly what daughters were meant to be. A burden. But what my brother didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn, was that my mother had spent 8 years quietly preparing for this moment. 8 years meeting with lawyers. 8 years putting plans into motion. 8 years building something Marcus would never see coming. Before I tell you what happened at the will reading, you need to understand the Mercer family.
Stuhlen. Ansatszunheit ist der Meldschrift des anderen, kommst mich äuferst, die Weiche forsch, am sie hier komme, blend ist käfen, nicht dem gleich und ansetzt.
My father, Robert Mercer, believed one thing above all else.
The son carries the family name.
Daughters, in his view, were temporary members of the household. They would eventually marry, change their last names, and disappear into someone else's life. He never said it cruelly. He simply lived by it. Marcus, my brother, was 6 years older than me. From the time he could walk, my father treated him like a future partner in the family legacy. They spent weekends together in the garage workshop, building furniture, fixing engines, and learning the contracting business my father had built from scratch. Meanwhile, I spent those same weekends in the kitchen helping my mother bake bread or fold laundry. No one ever said the roles were unfair. They were simply understood. Marcus got opportunities. I got responsibilities. When Marcus graduated high school, my father paid for his entire business degree at the University of Connecticut. When Marcus decided he wanted to go into real estate, my father introduced him to every developer, contractor, and property investor he knew. Doors opened effortlessly. Meanwhile, when I announced I wanted to attend nursing school, my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Girls don't need expensive educations," he said. "You'll marry someone who can provide for you." So I found another way. I applied for scholarships. I worked double shifts at a diner. I saved every dollar I could. And eventually, I paid my own way through nursing school. The night I received my acceptance letter, my mother pulled me aside after dinner. Marcus had just finished describing a big real estate deal he was working on, and my father had spent 20 minutes praising his ambition. My acceptance letter barely received a glance. But my mother squeezed my hand gently in the kitchen. "I've taken care of you," she whispered. "You may not understand it now, but I have." At the time, I assumed she meant emotional support. I had no idea she meant something much bigger. Because that same afternoon, my mother had met with a lawyer named Evelyn Cole and signed the first documents that would eventually change everything.
Ist keine.
2 years ago, our lives shifted suddenly. My mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was working a shift at Maplewood Senior Living when my phone rang. Seeing my father's name on the screen surprised me. He almost never called me. "Your mother's sick," he said. "You need to come home." Not "we need you." Just "you need to come home." Like it had always been my responsibility. So I did. Within a week, I moved back into my childhood home. I switched to night shifts so I could take care of my mother during the day. Doctor visits, chemotherapy appointments, radiation treatments. The long, quiet hours when cancer slowly drained her strength. My income dropped by nearly 20% because of the schedule change. But I never cared about the money. She was my mother. And she needed me. Marcus visited 3 times during those 2 years. Each visit followed the same pattern. He would arrive in an expensive suit, kiss Mom on the forehead, check his Rolex watch every few minutes, then leave before dinner.
His wife, Victoria, came once.
She spent the entire visit walking through the house taking photos for social media. She barely spoke to my mother at all. But Dad never criticized Marcus. In his mind, this was simply the natural order of things.
Sonst build lives.
Daughters take care of people. But my mother noticed. And slowly, quietly, she started taking action. Once a month she asked me to drive her to Hartford. She said she had insurance paperwork to handle. I would sit in the car while she met with someone inside a law office for about an hour. Every time she came back, she seemed lighter. Like she had removed a weight she'd been carrying for years. One evening after helping her into bed, she held my hand and looked at me with unusual seriousness. "You're such a good girl," she said softly. "Remember that you showed up when it mattered." At the time I thought she was talking about the cancer. I didn't realize she was talking about something else entirely.
Easier beste.
6 weeks ago, the doctors declared my mother cancer-free. I cried in the oncologist's office when we heard the news.
2 years of fear.
2 years of watching her struggle. And somehow, she had survived. We celebrated with lunch at her favorite cafe. For the first time in years, she ordered a glass of champagne. "I want to visit my mother," she said. She meant my grandmother, Eleanor, who lived in an assisted living center. Dad had been promising to drive her for months. Finally, 4 weeks ago, they made the trip. They never came back. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel on Interstate 95. The police said the collision was instant. They said my parents didn't suffer. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anyone ever really knows.
Die Kinn an Bibel, die Öl zu.
The funeral took place 4 days later. 80 people filled the church. Marcus delivered the eulogy. He spoke about my father for nearly 7 minutes. He mentioned my mother twice. Before the reception ended, Marcus pulled me aside near the church entrance. "We need to talk," he said. "About the house." And that was the moment my life changed again. Because the conversation that followed would leave me standing in the rain with my belongings on the lawn of the home I had lived in my entire life. But what Marcus didn't know yet was that my mother had already planned for that exact moment. And the truth would come out at the will reading. The funeral flowers had not even begun to wilt when my brother decided I no longer belonged in my own home. We were standing in the church vestibule.
Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting red and blue shadows across the floor.
People were still hugging relatives and quietly offering condolences. Marcus leaned closer so no one else could hear him. "You need to move out by the end of the week," he said. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "What?" "The house is mine now," he replied, adjusting his tie like he was discussing something ordinary. "We haven't even read the will yet," I said. "The will is just a formality," Marcus answered with a confident shrug. "You know how Dad felt.
The son inherits everything."
I stared at him, still holding the program from the funeral service. "Marcus, I've been living there taking care of Mom." "That was your choice," he said calmly.
"You could have built a real life somewhere else."
The words hit harder than I expected. "A real life?" I repeated quietly. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Look, Brianna,
I understand this is emotional for you,
but you chose nursing. You chose to stay here playing caretaker. That's not my responsibility." Behind him, his wife Victoria was already scrolling through her phone, looking bored. "You should be grateful," Marcus continued. "I'm giving you a full week to move your things." "Grateful."
The word caught in my throat.
"Marcus," I said slowly, "I took care of Mom for 2 years." "While you did what?" he snapped suddenly. "While I built something," he answered his own question. "While I made something of myself." He straightened his cuffs and lowered his voice. "You wiping bedpans isn't the same as running a business." Then he turned and walked back to Victoria.
Just like that.
Like the conversation was finished. Like I had never mattered in the first place.
Sich. Einen geht zu.
He didn't even give me a week. 2 days later, I came home from work at 7 in the evening. I was exhausted in that strange way grief creates. Everything felt slow and heavy. When I reached the front door, my key didn't work. I tried again. Then again. The lock had been changed. So had the deadbolt. Confused, I walked around to the garage. That's when I saw the boxes. Every single thing I owned was stacked against the wall in damp cardboard containers. Clothes. Books.
Family photos.
My nursing school diploma. The rain earlier that afternoon had soaked through several of the boxes. The diploma was already warped from the moisture. Through the living room window, I could see Victoria walking across the floor with a glass of wine in her hand. She noticed me standing outside.
For a moment we made eye contact.
She smiled. Then raised her wine glass in a small mock toast before turning away. I called Marcus immediately. He answered on the second ring. "The house is legally mine," he said before I could even speak. I had my lawyer confirm it. "Marcus, you threw my things outside." "You have 24 hours to remove them," he replied flatly. "After that, I'll have them taken away." "Marcus, I grew up in that house." "And now you don't live there anymore," he said. "That's how life works." Then he added one final sentence before hanging up.
"Maybe if you'd made something of yourself, you wouldn't be standing in the rain." Lassen sich Jasses, lassen sich Asse.
I sat down on the wet grass next to the boxes. For a while I didn't move. I just held the one item that hadn't been damaged.
My mother's old Timex watch.
The hospital had returned it to me after she passed away. I had slipped it into my pocket that morning without thinking. That's when I found the letter. It was buried in a box of my mother's belongings. Things Marcus probably assumed were worthless. Old photographs, her gardening gloves, a few recipe cards, and a cream-colored envelope with my name written across the front.
For Brianna, when the time comes.
I couldn't open it there. Not on that lawn. So instead I called the only person I trusted.
Diane Foster.
The head nurse where I worked. She arrived 30 minutes later in her old Honda minivan. She didn't ask questions. She just stepped out of the car and said, "Get in."
You're staying with me tonight.
Her apartment wasn't fancy. 2 small bedrooms in a Hartford building that had clearly seen better days. But it was warm,
Dry.
and safe. She handed me a blanket and a cup of tea. That's when I finally allowed myself to cry.
A-I-N.
Later that night, when the tears slowed enough for me to breathe again, I opened my mother's letter. Her handwriting looked shaky. Chemo had made her hands tremble near the end. The first line made my chest tighten.
My darling Brianna.
If you are reading this, then the moment I feared has finally arrived.
I read slowly.
Your father and your brother have shown you exactly who they are. I want you to know that I always saw it. And I could not change your father. God knows I tried. My hands trembled as I continued. But I could protect you.
Contact Evelyn Cole at Harrison & Cole Law in Hartford.
She has everything you need.
All the documents.
All the arrangements. Everything I couldn't give you while I was alive.
Tears blurred the page. You are not a burden.
You never were.
You are the best thing I ever did.
I love you more than lavender and sunshine and every good thing. Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I called the number written at the bottom.
Wer sind?
The law office was located in an old brownstone building in downtown Hartford. Brass nameplates. Hardwood floors that creaked when you walked. The kind of place that smelled like history. I felt out of place walking in wearing my clean nursing scrubs. But the receptionist greeted me kindly and led me into a quiet office filled with books. The woman waiting inside stood up to shake my hand. She was elegant. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. Tailored charcoal suit. Brianna, she said gently. I've been expecting your call. My throat tightened immediately. My mother said you had papers. Evelyn Cole gestured toward the chair across from her desk. We worked together for 8 years, she explained. Your mother was very deliberate. 8 years. The same amount of time she had mentioned the night I got accepted to nursing school. She knew your father's intentions, Evelyn continued carefully. She knew Marcus would inherit everything your father controlled. And she couldn't change that.
My heart sank.
So Marcus was right? No, Evelyn said calmly. Your mother simply planned around it. I frowned. What does that mean? Evelyn folded her hands together. It means your mother created arrangements that exist completely outside your father's estate.
Arrangements your brother knows nothing about. My pulse quickened.
What kind of arrangements? Evelyn smiled slightly. You'll learn that at the will reading next week. That's when everything will be revealed.
I leaned forward.
Why wait? Because, she said softly, your mother wanted Marcus there when it happens.
Es giebte. 3 days before the will reading, Marcus called me again.
This time his tone was different. Friendly. Too friendly. I've been thinking, he said. This whole situation between us isn't good for anyone. You threw me out 2 days after our parents' funeral, I replied. I know, he said quickly. I could have handled that better. Then he made an offer. I'll give you $10,000, he said. In exchange for signing a document saying you won't contest the estate.
$10,000.
For 2 years of caring for our dying mother. For my entire childhood home. For every sacrifice I had made. Take it, he continued. You'll just waste money on lawyers anyway. You're not going to win anything. I thought about my mother's letter. About the lawyer waiting for the will reading. No, I said.
I'll see you there.
Marcus' voice hardened immediately. You're making a mistake. We'll find out soon, I replied calmly. Then I hung up. Because for the first time in my life, I knew something he didn't. And in 3 days, the truth was finally going to come out. The will reading was scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The location was the same law office where I had met Evelyn Cole earlier that week. Harrison and Cole sat inside an old brownstone in downtown Hartford, the kind of building that looked like it had been standing long before any of us were born. Inside, the conference room was formal and quiet. A long mahogany table filled most of the space, polished so carefully that the overhead lights reflected off its surface. 6 chairs were arranged around it. Only 5 of them were occupied when I arrived. Marcus and Victoria were already there. Marcus sat with the confidence of someone who believed the day would end exactly the way he expected. Victoria sat beside him scrolling through her phone, clearly bored. Evelyn Cole stood near the window reviewing a folder of documents. Her assistant sat quietly beside her with a laptop ready to record everything. When I stepped inside the room, Marcus looked up and smirked. You actually came, he said. I told you I would. Victoria finally glanced up from her phone. Well, she said lightly, let's just get this over with. But before anyone else could speak, the door opened again. And someone unexpected walked in. My grandmother.
Eleanor Whitfield.
She was 82 years old, but she walked into that room with the steady confidence of someone half her age. Her silver hair was pinned neatly back, and the sapphire ring on her hand caught the light as she took the seat beside me. Marcus looked genuinely confused. I didn't know you were coming, he said. Grandma simply folded her hands. I was asked to be here.
By my daughter.
Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Victoria. Well, he said with forced politeness, the more the merrier, I guess. He leaned back in his chair. Let's start with Dad's will. Evelyn nodded. We will be reading 2 wills today, she said calmly.
Robert Mercer's and Linda Mercer's.
Victoria frowned slightly. Why would that matter? Everything they owned was joint property.
Evelyn gave a small professional smile. Not everything.
That seemed to catch Marcus off guard. But he quickly recovered his composure. Fine, he said. Read Dad's first.
Ich habe, zeigte Dave, legte klar, dat der Ich bog zeigte.
Evelyn opened the first folder. Her voice was clear and steady as she began.
Last Will and Testament of Robert Allen Mercer.
She read through several standard legal sections first. Executor appointments.
Funeral instructions.
Debt settlement clauses. Marcus sat comfortably the entire time. He looked like a man waiting to hear something he already believed was guaranteed. Finally, Evelyn reached the part everyone had been waiting for. The distribution of assets. Marcus leaned forward slightly. To my son Marcus Robert Mercer, Evelyn read, I leave 70% of my personal assets. Marcus nodded slowly. Satisfied. Evelyn continued. This includes vehicles, workshop equipment, and my share of any jointly held financial accounts. Victoria gave Marcus a quick pleased smile. Then Evelyn continued reading. To my daughter, Brianna Lynn Mercer, I leave 30% of my remaining personal assets. Victoria immediately whispered something under her breath. Marcus leaned back in his chair again. Well, he said smugly, that's more than I expected Dad to leave you. Evelyn ignored the comment and continued reading until the will concluded. When she finished, she closed the folder. Marcus looked pleased with himself. See? He said casually. That wasn't so bad. He turned toward me with a patronizing smile. Dad's accounts had around $80,000 total. After everything is settled, you'll probably get about $24,000. He shrugged. Not bad for someone who didn't contribute to the family business. Grandma spoke quietly from beside me. Marcus, she said. Perhaps you should let the lawyer finish before celebrating. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. What's left to finish?
The house was Dad's.
The money was Dad's. I'm the primary heir. Brianna gets what Dad decided she deserved. Victoria was already typing on her phone again. Probably preparing a social media post about the inheritance. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She calmly opened the second folder. Robert Mercer's will represents only one portion of your parents' estate.
Marcus' smile falteret.
What do you mean?
Evelyn met his eyes.
Your mother's estate is separate. And significantly larger. The room went quiet.
Marcus laughed softly.
That's not possible. Mom was a housewife. Everything she had came from Dad. That's not accurate, Evelyn replied calmly.
Marcus stood up.
I know my own family. Evelyn didn't react. Instead, she slid a document across the table. 5 years ago, your parents executed a deed transfer. Marcus frowned. What? The property at 127 Maple Drive was transferred into Linda Mercer's sole name. Marcus grabbed the document and scanned it quickly. That doesn't make sense. Dad would never. It was done for liability protection, Evelyn explained. Your father was facing a potential lawsuit from a contractor dispute at the time. Moving the house into your mother's name protected it from legal claims. Marcus looked stunned. That was supposed to be temporary. Grandma spoke quietly. Your mother told your father it was temporary. But the deed was never changed back. Marcus stared at the paper in disbelief. Evelyn continued calmly. The property is currently valued at approximately $650,000. And because the house legally belonged to Linda Mercer, she turned toward me. It was hers to leave to whomever she chose.
Marcus' voice rose sharply.
No. This has to be wrong. Evelyn opened another page. According to her will, the house at 127 Maple Drive is left entirely to... She paused briefly.
Brianna Lynn Mercer.
The silence in the room became absolute. Marcus slowly lowered the paper in his hands.
Victoria's face had gone pale.
You're telling me, Marcus said slowly, that the house I just kicked her out of
belongs to her?
Yes, Evelyn said calmly. It always did. Marcus stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She reached for another document. And that, she said quietly, is only the beginning. Because my mother had spent 8 years preparing something much bigger than a house. And the next document Evelyn opened would reveal a secret my brother never imagined. The room stayed silent after Evelyn revealed the truth about the house.
Marcus sat frozen, still holding the deed transfer document in his hands.
It looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. Victoria leaned toward him and whispered something urgently, but Marcus barely reacted. His eyes stayed locked on the paper. That's impossible, he said finally. My father would never have allowed that. Grandma Eleanor spoke before Evelyn could respond. Your father didn't know, she said calmly. Marcus turned toward her slowly. What do you mean he didn't know? Grandma folded her hands in front of her. Linda told him the house transfer was temporary. It was meant to protect the property from that lawsuit your father was facing.
Marcus shook his head.
That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Grandma replied quietly. Your father never bothered to check the paperwork. For a moment, Marcus didn't speak. He just stared down at the table like the answer might appear there. Then Evelyn cleared her throat gently. As I mentioned earlier, she said, the house is only one portion of Linda Mercer's estate. Marcus looked up again. What else could there possibly be? Evelyn opened another document inside the folder. 8 years ago, she said, Linda Mercer established an irrevocable trust.
Marcus blinked.
A what? An irrevocable trust, Evelyn repeated. It's a legal structure used to hold and manage assets for a beneficiary. Once established, it cannot be modified or cancelled without the beneficiary's consent. Victoria frowned.
Who's the beneficiary?
Evelyn turned her gaze toward me.
Brianna Lynn Mercer.
For a moment I couldn't breathe.
Marcus let out a sharp laugh.
You're telling me Mom secretly created a trust fund for her? That is correct. Marcus leaned forward again, his frustration growing.
With what money?
Mom didn't have money. She didn't work. Grandma spoke again. She had my money. Marcus turned sharply toward her. What? I gave my daughter $400,000 8 years ago, Grandma said simply. It was my gift to her. Marcus stared at her. You gave Mom $400,000 and she just invested it, Evelyn finished calmly. The trust was funded with that gift. Your mother invested the funds in diversified index portfolios over the past 8 years. Marcus' face went pale. And today, Evelyn continued, consulting the document in front of her, the trust is valued at approximately $1.2 million. The number seemed to echo inside the room.
1 million.
Victoria's hand flew to her mouth.
Marcus whispered the number slowly.
1.2 million.
Yes.
And because the trust is irrevocable, Evelyn added, and funded with assets that were never part of your father's estate, it is legally protected. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. Dad didn't know about any of this. Evelyn didn't react. Your father's knowledge is irrelevant. The trust was established legally and recorded properly. It has always belonged to Brianna. I felt dizzy. For years I had believed my mother struggled financially. She wore the same old Timex watch every day. She grew vegetables in the backyard instead of buying them. She never spent money on expensive things.
And all that time,
she had been quietly building a future for me. Marcus ran a hand through his hair.
This can't be real.
It is, Evelyn replied. And we're not finished. Marcus looked like he might be sick. What else could there possibly be? Evelyn lifted another document. Your mother also held a life insurance policy. Victoria spoke immediately. Everyone has life insurance. That doesn't change anything. This one might, Evelyn said calmly. The policy is valued at $500,000.
Marcus blinked again.
And the beneficiary? Evelyn didn't hesitate.
Brianna Lynn Mercer. Victoria made a small choking sound.
500,000? Yes. She purchased the policy 12 years ago. The premiums were paid through funds your grandmother gifted her annually.
Marcus shook his head slowly. This is insane.
So let me understand this.
The house goes to Brianna. The trust goes to Brianna. The life insurance goes to Brianna.
Yes, Evelyn said simply. Marcus laughed again, but there was no humor in it now. So what exactly do I get?
Evelyn pulled out one final page.
Your mother left you her personal belongings.
Marcus blinked.
What? Her jewelry collection. Photographs. And a letter written specifically for you. Marcus stared at her. A letter? Victoria spoke sharply. You're telling me she left Brianna millions of dollars. And Marcus gets a letter? The jewelry collection also has value, Evelyn said politely. I don't want her jewelry, Marcus exploded.
I want what Dad promised me.
The words echoed in the room. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I heard my own voice. Quiet, but steady. You visited Mom 3 times in 2 years. Marcus turned toward me slowly. You told me I was nothing but a burden. You kicked me out of the house 2 days after her funeral. I held his gaze. What exactly did you earn? Marcus' jaw tightened. You think this makes you better than me? I didn't say that. But you did spend your entire life believing you deserved everything.
Victoria suddenly stood up.
This is ridiculous.
She's a nurse. She vibes old peoples.
Grandma cut her off sharply.
And yet she's the one your mother trusted.
Victoria stopped speaking. Marcus looked around the room like he was searching for someone to blame. Finally, Evelyn spoke again.
Let me summarize the final distribution.
She looked down at her notes. From Linda Mercer's estate, Brianna receives the house at 127 Maple Drive valued at approximately $650,000.
From the Irrevocable Trust, $1,20 Million. From the Life Insurance Policy, $500,000.
And from Robert Mercer's estate, 30% of remaining liquid assets, approximately $24,000. She closed the folder. The total value passing to Brianna Mercer is approximately... She paused. $2.3 million.
The number hung in the air. Marcus gripped the edge of the table.
His knuckles turned white. Then suddenly his eyes rolled back. And he collapsed onto the floor.
Victoria screamed.
Evelyn's assistant immediately rushed forward to check his pulse while dialing for an ambulance. He fainted, the assistant said after a moment. Probably shock.
I sat there frozen, watching my brother lying on the floor of a law office.
Destroyed by numbers on a page. Grandma squeezed my hand gently. Your mother knew exactly what she was doing, she whispered. But the moment Marcus woke up, he would say something none of us expected. And it would change everything one more time. The room stayed tense even after the paramedics left. Marcus sat back in his chair, pale and shaky, a small bandage taped above his eyebrow where he had hit the edge of the table when he fainted. Victoria hovered beside him, whispering anxiously while holding his arm. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was staring at me. You knew, he said hoarsely. You knew about all of this.
I shook my head slowly.
I didn't. Not until a few days earlier, and even then I hadn't known how much my mother had actually done. But you suspected, he insisted. You sat there acting innocent while you waited for this. I knew Mom loved me, I said quietly. That's all I knew for sure.
Marcus let out a bitter laugh.
And she didn't love me? I paused before answering. I think she loved you, I said carefully. But she also saw the choices you made. Victoria tightened her grip on his shoulder. Marcus, we should go, she whispered. We need to figure out what to do. Marcus ignored her. He kept staring at me. Brianna, you have to help me. The words shocked me more than anything that had happened that day. Help him? We're family, he added quickly. For a moment the room went quiet. Family. The same word he had ignored for years. I looked at him and remembered everything. 3 visits in 2 years. Standing in the rain beside my soaked belongings. Enjoy being homeless. The memories sat between us like a wall. Marcus, I said calmly, you kicked me out of my own house 2 days after our parents' funeral. You told me I was nothing but a burden. You tried to get me to sign away everything for $10,000. Marcus ran a hand across his face. I was under pressure, he said quickly. The investments, the business deals, things went wrong. That's not who I really am. I studied him carefully. Then, who are you? Because the man sitting across from me wasn't the brother I remembered from childhood. That boy had disappeared somewhere along the way. I'm not going to let my brother become homeless, I said finally. Marcus looked relieved for a brief moment. But I wasn't finished. I'm also not going to rescue you from decisions you made while treating me like I was worthless. His relief disappeared. So that's it? He asked bitterly.
You walk away with millions and leave me with nothing?
You're not leaving with nothing, I replied. You're leaving with exactly what you earned.
The truth hung in the air between us.
Marcus had spent his entire life believing the world would hand him everything. Now he was discovering that belief wasn't reality. I picked up my bag. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said quietly. I'm doing it because I finally understand something Mom tried to teach me. What? I don't have to accept treatment that I would never give to someone else. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. But the words never came. For once, he had nothing left to say.
Weckte und Einzige, Jesu denn die Gebärden, wickten und folge so.
Grandma followed me out into the hallway. Wait, she said gently. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Your mother wanted you to have this. I opened the box slowly. Inside was the sapphire ring Grandma had worn for as long as I could remember.
The deep blue stone caught the hallway light.
I can't take this, I said immediately.
It belongs to you.
Grandma smiled softly.
It belonged to me once.
I gave it to your mother on her wedding day. And she gave it back to me before she died. So I could give it to you.
My hands trembled slightly as I slid the ring onto my finger.
It fit perfectly. There's something else you should know, Grandma said quietly. Something your mother didn't write in the will. I looked up.
Before you were born, Linda almost left your father.
The words surprised me. She stayed when she found out she was pregnant with Marcus, Grandma continued. She hoped things would change. They didn't. Grandma's voice softened. She always regretted that she couldn't give you a different childhood.
The trust, the insurance, everything she built.
It was her way of giving you the freedom she never had. The freedom to walk away from people who didn't value you. I hugged her tightly. Thank you, I whispered. She shook her head gently.
Don't thank me. Just live well. That's all your mother ever wanted.
SS. 1 month later, I sat in the office of a financial advisor. Evelyn had recommended her. She had 20 years of experience and no interest in pushing risky investments. Here's my recommendation, she said, sliding a document across the desk. We leave the trust invested. You withdraw only what you need.
The life insurance money goes into savings.
And we pay off your student loans immediately. $42,000 of debt. Gone with a single payment. Then she said something that surprised me. You should keep working. I blinked. You don't think I should retire? She smiled.
You love your job. Money shouldn't change who you are.
It should only give you options. She was right. So that's what I did. I stayed at Maplewood.
I switched back to daytime shifts.
And for the first time in my life, I worked because I wanted to. Not because I had to.
Unwichtig.
The house on Maple Drive took longer to figure out. Too many memories lived inside those walls.
Some beautiful.
Some painful. I wasn't ready to move back in. But I also couldn't sell it. Not yet. So I rented it to a young couple. The wife was a nurse from Maplewood. They had 2 little girls. The older daughter asked if she could take care of the lavender garden in the backyard. I told her yes. Watching that garden grow again felt like the right kind of healing.
Ansehen.
3 months after the will reading, Grandma called with news. Marcus sold the house in Greenwich, she said. Victoria filed for divorce. Apparently the expensive lifestyle they had built together had depended heavily on the inheritance Marcus thought he was getting. Without it, everything collapsed. He moved into a small apartment in Bridgeport. Still working in real estate. But far from the glamorous life he once had. The old version of me might have felt satisfied hearing that. Instead, I just felt tired. I don't wish him harm, I told Grandma. I know you don't, she replied. That's the difference between you and him.
Ich beschwichtigte selbst die Anweisung des Buch.
6 months later, I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program. It had always been my dream. But I could never afford it before. Now I could. Not because someone handed me success, but because my mother believed in me enough to protect my future. The truth is, my mother didn't just leave me money. She left me something far more valuable.
She left me freedom.
Freedom to live my life without needing approval from people who never valued me. Freedom to walk away from anyone who tried to make me feel small. And freedom to finally believe something my mother had known all along. I was never a burden. I was simply someone who deserved better.